It's award season in the NFL world, which means millions are clamoring about who should be the defensive player, coach, rookie of the year, and of course the never-ending MVP debate between the regular season merchants Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. But there's an honor that's more prestigious than them all, that has been tragically exiled from the mainstream. Each year, one outstanding individual is decorated with the title of the NFL's least valuable player. Here are the finalists for the 2024 season. Daniel Jones. In 2023, the New York Giants paid Daniel Jones $160 million to be their franchise quarterback. Less than 2 years later, they cut him. Not benched, not traded, straight up cut. So how did it all fall apart so fast? After leading the Giants to their first playoff win in over a decade, Jones seemed like he'd finally turned the corner. He was poised, mobile, and protected the football under Brian Daboll's system. The Giants then rewarded him with a 4-year, $160 million contract, a deal that screamed, "This is our guy," while 50% of Giants fans screamed in terror, and the other 50% hypnotized themselves into thinking it was fine. The Giants added pieces to help him succeed. At least, that was the idea.
The New York Giants acquiring star tight end Darren Waller,
trading for Darren Waller and drafting Jalen Hyatt. The expectation? He'd build on his breakout year and lead the Giants into consistent playoff contention. I even had multiple people tell me at the peak of the Daniel Jones is good delusion that he was better than Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler has his own imperfections, but that was insanity. Here's the thing. Sometimes a breakout season is just a fluke, and Daniel Jones was the perfect example. His 2023 season was a total disaster, tainted by regression and injury. Dimes unraveled, throwing just 2 touchdowns against 6 picks in 6 starts before suffering a season-ending ACL tear. Dimes in a bad O-line is a fatal combination, evidenced by his 30 sacks in just the 6 games, while his inability to push the ball downfield exposed his limitations as a franchise quarterback. The Giants' offense practically self-destructed. Darren Waller decided retirement was a better option than doing cardio with Daniel Jones on Sundays. And it was clear that Jones' 2022 breakout was more of pure luck than a sign of growth. So fast forward to 2024, he was healed from his ACL tear and eager to redeem himself, with an elite rookie receiver in Malik Neighbors to feed the ball to. But instead, we learned that the only man who can stop Malik Neighbors is Daniel Jones. In 10 starts, he only threw 8 touchdowns and went 2-8, making him 3-13 since signing his $160 million deal. His lack of field vision made head coach Brian Daboll rip his hair out. So, Daboll and the Giants front office took their frustrations out by benching Daniel Jones after Week 10, having him play scout team safety in practice, and then releasing him outright shortly thereafter. He finished out the season in Minnesota backing up Sam Darnold. The release of Dimes ended an era that lasted far too long in the eyes of nearly everyone. No one expected him to be taken 6th overall in 2019, and then the fact that he managed to have the starting job in New York for 6 seasons while being a bottom-tier quarterback for almost that entire time, it was nothing short of a miracle. On the fan side of things, even the most staunch Dimes supporters cried tears of joy that the nightmare was finally over. Now, they'll have the opportunity to find their next franchise signal caller in one of the weakest quarterback classes of the last 10 years. Real quick, if you love this type of content, subscribe so you can always get the videos as soon as they drop. Back to the video. Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson was supposed to be, and perhaps still is, the future in Indianapolis. A 6'4", 240-pound freak athlete with a cannon for an arm, he was taken 4th overall in 2023 to save the Colts. But in 2024, he left everyone dumbfounded on a weekly basis. When the Colts took him in the draft, they thought they were getting the next Cam Newton or even Josh Allen, an elite athlete who could dominate with both his arm and legs. Finally, a symbol of hope after years of cycling through washed-up quarterbacks following Andrew Luck's retirement. The hype was real. He was measurably the most athletic quarterback of all time, and the Colts believed they'd struck gold. Meanwhile, Shane Steichen, fresh off of working with Jalen Hurts, was the new head coach, perfect for unlocking Richardson's potential and molding him into a game-breaking dual-threat quarterback. And he flashed big time in his rookie year, but it was short-lived. Injury ended his season in Week 5, but skip ahead to 2024, the Colts were of course ecstatic to have their franchise quarterback fully healthy once again. And in Week 1, he was electric. throwing for 212 yards on only 9 completions, making absurd off-platform throws, and continuing to punish defenses on the ground. But this performance would make the ones that followed that much more frustrating. Richardson struggled with basic quarterback fundamentals, missing open receivers, poor footwork, and mechanical flaws that led to erratic throws. If you need someone to make an insane 60-yard throw falling backwards, Richardson's your guy. But ask him to complete a 5-yard crossing route, it might not look like he's ever touched a football before. Sure, there were highlight reel moments, 50-yard bomb here, a 30-yard scramble there, but they were isolated flashes and not signs of sustained success. The spurts of talent, plays that only he and a couple of other quarterbacks on earth can make, those are great. But to win in the NFL, you need to sustain drives. And a completion percentage of 48 just isn't going to get the job done. Anthony Richardson's athleticism is both a gift and a curse. Without it, he wouldn't be an NFL quarterback. But with how much he relies on it, he essentially turns himself into just an athlete who happens to be playing quarterback. Then, of course, came the debacle where he subbed himself out of the game because he was tired, which was actually what he said.
Man, tired, I ain't gonna lie. That was a lot of running right there that I did. And
This seemed to have a split reaction in the locker room. Half of his teammates were disgusted, and the other half were like, yeah, I'd be tired too. Meanwhile, it didn't help A-Rich that the Colts had a 39-year-old Joe Flacco chilling on the bench because for some reason, I guess due to his bizarrely hot Cleveland run in 2023, everyone was acting like Indy had prime Aaron Rodgers just chilling on their bench. I mean, seriously, the way Flacco was talked about, who wasn't even good in his prime, you would have thought they had an MVP caliber quarterback holding the clipboard.
Fran Stalinaskevich Davidovinsky.
And the Colts did indeed decide to bench Richardson for Flacco, and it was supposed to be for the remainder of the regular season. But if you can believe it, Flacco was not the second coming of Dan Marino, and his jig was up after just 2 starts. Richardson stepped back in again in a fairly unnoteworthy fashion, finishing off one of the most disappointing seasons from a pure passing perspective that I can recall. Now, the Colts are once again saddled with uncertainty at quarterback. Richardson is confirmed to be the starter heading into 2025. Now, I don't think he was the worst quarterback of 2024, but he was the worst passer of 2024. So if he doesn't improve drastically as a passer next season, he's going to be headed straight to the Justin Fields Center for quarterbacks who can't throw good on a full scholarship. Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts was supposed to be a unicorn, the greatest tight end prospect perhaps of all time. Too fast for linebackers, too big for corners, and drafted to change the tight end position forever. Instead, he became just another guy. In the 2021 draft, the Falcons took him 4th overall, the highest a tight end has ever been drafted, taken ahead of Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, Pat Surtain, Devonta Smith, Micah Parsons. Why? Because he was supposed to be the next evolution of the position. A 6'6", 245-pound mismatched nightmare with wide receiver skills and tight end size. And his rookie season gave fans a glimpse of that potential. Over 1,000 receiving yards, Pro Bowl honors, and flashes of dominance. The expectation was very reasonable. Just be as good or maybe even better than Travis Kelce and we won't be disappointed. That's all he had to do. But then the last 3 seasons happened. Despite all the supposed talent, Pitts has simply vanished when the Falcons have needed him the most. There were games where he had 0 catches. In 2022, he averaged 35 yards per game receiving, and then he tore his ACL. In 2023, wasn't any better. But during this time, the Falcons had the worst quarterback play in the NFL, and Arthur Smith's offensive scheme didn't do him any favors. Pitts was often used as a decoy or a blocker, which made no sense for a guy drafted that high, at least so we thought. But even when he got opportunities, the production just wasn't there. Nonetheless, in 2024, there was still a sliver of hope that Pitts could deliver on the potential he once promised. A new coaching regime, and Kirk Cousins under center. But all Kyle Pitts accomplished this season was making people realize that Arthur Smith wasn't actually an idiot for playing Jonnu Smith over him in 2023. Just 47 catches for 602 yards and 4 touchdowns in 17 games. Kyle Pitts went from being the most exciting part of the Falcons' rebuild to an afterthought in the offense. Fans once dreamed of a Hall of Fame career. Now, they don't even notice he's on the team. He's shaping up to be one of the busts of the 2020s. When you're taken 4th overall and expected to change the league, and then you don't even change your own offense, that's a problem. It's one thing to draft a bust. It's another thing to draft a bust when you could have taken practically anyone else who went in the next 8 picks and gotten a Pro Bowler. Will Levis. Levis was a very polarizing prospect in the 2023 draft. He was raw and unpolished at Kentucky, but he had a cannon for an arm, and he was very athletic, enough to get delusional people to think that he could be the next Josh Allen. But instead of going top 5 like some people thought he should, he fell to the 2nd round. And unfortunately, instead of becoming the Titans' franchise quarterback, he's become the NFL's premier traveling circus. Levis entered the league with a point to prove after falling in the draft. He had the arm talent, the physical tools, and the confidence of somebody who puts mayonnaise in his coffee without flinching. His rookie year showed flashes of brilliance. Remember that 4-touchdown debut? I mean, that was fantastic. Titans fans thought, maybe we found our guy. But here was the problem, which I think was forgotten heading into 2024. He only threw another 4 touchdowns combined in the 8 games after his debut. But it was more fun to remember the guy who'd dive headfirst into defenders and flex after throwing a deep bomb. And not to accuse anyone of anything, but I feel like Will Levis would not have gotten the hype he did if he wasn't jacked and an objectively good-looking guy and also dated Gia Duddy. But that's just my theory. And in the first month of the 2024 season, it seemed like Levis had one comically bad viral play each week. Even his coach had to ask him what the f he was doing when he tried to do whatever this was against the Jets. His fearless attitude, it just looked more like recklessness. Despite his size and toughness, Levis showed zero pocket presence, had happy feet, and panicked under pressure, taking unnecessary sacks. And his gritty persona only works when you're winning. When you're throwing picks and losing games, it starts to look like empty swagger.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
What?
It insists upon itself.
What does that even mean?
When it was all said and done, Levis put together a strong LVP campaign. A 2-10 record, 2,091 yards, 13 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and 10 fumbles. The Titans hoped they'd solve their quarterback problem post-Ryan Tannehill, but Titans fans went from excited about his potential to dreading every snap. The only thing Will Levis has done to help Tennessee is securing the 1st overall pick this year, but it doesn't sound like they'll be taking a quarterback 1st overall in 2025. So who will be under center come week 1 next season in Tennessee is truly a mystery. Will Levis turned out to be exactly what his draft day slide warned us about. Big arm, no discipline, and all the swagger without the play to back it up. The Titans bet on the mayonnaise man, and all they got was a mess. Since you're still with me, please subscribe to help the channel grow so I can pump out more quality content for you. Back to the video. Deshaun Watson. After trading 3 first-round picks to acquire him, the Cleveland Browns gave Deshaun Watson $230 million, fully guaranteed, the largest guaranteed contract in NFL history at the time. They thought they were getting a franchise savior. Instead, they made not one of, the worst investment in sports history. The Watson trade wasn't any old little gamble. It was an all-in bet on an almost universally disliked quarterback who had just spent the entire 2021 season on the couch. They believed they were getting the same guy who led the NFL in passing yards in 2020, a dynamic dual-threat quarterback capable of elevating the Browns' elite roster to Super Bowl contention. The Browns front office was willing to pay whatever it took to get what they thought was a top 5 quarterback. And Browns fans, desperate for stability after decades of quarterback failures, reluctantly bought in. The expectations were sky high: MVP caliber performances, playoff runs, and a Lombardi trophy. But when he returned from suspension late in 2022, he was never able to shake off the rust. However, given the small sample, hope was not lost. In 2023, he'd be back to normal, or so Cleveland hoped. After a few games, it became clear that this was not rust. It was regression. He looked nothing like the elite quarterback he'd been in the past, like he was scared to play QB at the NFL level. In key moments, Watson became a liability. Costly interceptions, fumbles, and boneheaded decisions that killed drives and momentum. Unlike elite quarterbacks who rallied their teams, Watson seemed disconnected. Body language on the sidelines, lack of visible leadership, and it looked like he was just collecting a check. On top of the pathetic play, Watson struggled to stay healthy, and his season was ultimately cut short by surgery on his throwing shoulder. Which brings us to 2024. As bad as he was in 2023, he was significantly worse this past season. His QBR dropped from 43 in 2023 to 23 in 2024. Will Levis and Anthony Richardson were bad, but they were not nearly as bad as Deshaun Watson. So bad that when the Browns' $230 million quarterback tore his Achilles in Week 7, it was seen as a fortunate event for the franchise. Finally, they'd have no choice but to cut the cord in 2025 or 2026 at the absolute latest. Watson finished with 1,148 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions in 7 games in 2024. Since his Achilles surgery, he actually tore his Achilles again, making him the only person I've ever heard of who tore their Achilles twice in a few months. Who knows what exactly the Browns will do at quarterback next season, but whoever it is, whatever it is, it probably will not be pretty. So we've run through the finalists, but who was actually the NFL's least valuable player of 2024? Honestly, I wish it were a different year and a more debatable choice, but there's one name that stands above the rest. You cannot say anyone other than Deshaun Watson. While the others failed in their own ways, Watson's failure was catastrophic on a different level because of the sheer scale of what was invested in him. The Browns didn't just draft him high or give him a big contract. They handed him the largest fully guaranteed deal in NFL history. They traded away multiple first-round picks, reshaped their entire franchise around him, and in return, they got a quarterback who wasn't merely below average, injury-prone, and a glaring liability on the field. He was the worst quarterback in the league by a wide margin. Daniel Jones was overpaid, but he didn't hamstring his franchise for the next 5 years. Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are young quarterbacks who struggled, but at least their teams won't be crippled if they fail. They can easily move on. Kyle Pitts has been a disappointment, but he's a tight end. His failures don't tear down a franchise. Deshaun Watson's failures do. His bad play didn't just cost games, it cost the Browns their future, wasted the prime years of a Super Bowl caliber roster, and left them with no financial flexibility to fix the mess. And the worst part? They're still stuck with him. It doesn't even need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. No team would ever trade for him. He'll probably be out of the league entirely after his Brown stint is over, and Cleveland will have to be very creative if they're going to find a way to cut him responsibly. When you're paid like you're the best player in the league, and then you actively sink your entire franchise, and are despised by your home fans, there's no way around it. You are the least valuable player in the NFL. If you love NFL mini docs, click this playlist to watch more now, and subscribe for more NFL content.